Old Dominick Distillery is a family-owned craft distillery located in the heart of downtown Memphis, Tennessee. The distillery offers a range of spirits, including vodka, gin, and bourbon, in addition to their newly released Tennessee whiskey and bottled and bond Tennessee whiskey. Old Dominick's flagship Tennessee whiskey is a unique blend of corn, rye, and malted barley, aged in the heart of downtown Memphis, where the hot and humid summers and cool winters work their magic on the barrels over time. Old Dominick Tennessee whiskeys are available now in Tennessee, Missouri, Arkansas, and Mississippi, with additional state distribution coming later this year. To learn more about Old Dominick, visit their website at olddominic.com to find out where it's available near you, or check out their online retailers to have it delivered straight to your door.
With Liquor Barn, you can shop your favorite bourbon, that perfect bottle of wine, or discover something new. To place an order for pickup or delivery, download the Liquor Barn app, visit liquorbarn.com, or call your nearest Liquor Barn location. Follow us on social media and subscribe to our email list for all the latest news on products, promotions, and events. Liquor Barn, where Kentuckians go to celebrate life. Cheers!
There's a new award-winning 4-grain straight bourbon whiskey that's been taking the market by storm, Penelope Bourbon. Bottled in historic Bardstown, Kentucky, Penelope's balanced yet flavorful taste profile comes from a unique blend of 3 bourbon mash bills. Currently available in multiple expressions, Penelope is remarkably smooth and flavorful. So whether you're sipping neat or using it in your favorite cocktail, Penelope is the perfect choice for you. Penelope's full lineup is available in select markets as well as online. Visit penelopebourbon.com to learn more and to find a store near you.
Welcome to the Bourbon Life Podcast, your source for all things bourbon. Join your hosts, Mark and Matt, as they drink and review bourbons, share news about upcoming events, interview the who's who in the bourbon world, and, most importantly, bring you along for the fun of living the bourbon life. Now, here's your hosts, Mark and Matt.
All right, everybody, welcome back for another episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight here live in the Bourbon Life studios, it's my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing, man?
Hey, Mark, I am doing great. It's always good to be back in your basement, otherwise known as the Bourbon Life studios. How are you doing this evening?
You know what, Matt? I'm doing really good. It seems like it's been so long since we've been together. So I'm happy we're able to get back together here in the basement and have a really good time. So I'm looking forward to tonight's show. We've been planning this one for a while, and it's a repeat guest, so it's going to be a lot of fun. But before we jump into it, I do need to tell everybody that we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Old Dominick Distillery. So with that said, Matt, and I do need to thank all of our other sponsors as well. Of course, we appreciate all their support and everything they do for us. With that said, Matt, you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight?
I would love to. We do have a great repeat guest, and unfortunately not great repeat hosts, but anyway, the guest will make up for that. Joining us this evening, this morning, this afternoon, whenever it is you're listening to the Bourbon Life Podcast, is the master distiller from Old Dominick Distillery in Memphis, Tennessee, Alex Castle. Alex, welcome back to the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Hey, y'all. Thanks for having me again.
Yeah. And again.
And again. I love this. This is great.
This is awesome. Well, thank you so much for joining us again, Alex. Really excited to have you back on the show. Really been looking forward to this. I know you have been extremely busy over the last few weeks, and we can dive into that here in just a little bit. But before we start the conversation and get too deep into anything, let's talk about what we have poured up and what we're going to be drinking on this first round. So if you don't care, just to take some time and tell our listeners what it is that we have poured up here.
Yeah, so we're starting with our newly released Old Dominick Tennessee Straight Whiskey. This is a product that was released in Memphis only back in the fall. It was late October, early November. And then we started rolling it out to other markets, including the rest of Tennessee at the beginning of this year. And this is our first whiskey start to finish in Memphis. It's also the first whiskey start to finish in Memphis since Prohibition.
Okay.
So huge milestone for the city and for the distillery. And this is our very traditional bourbon mash bill. It's going to be 75% corn, 13% rye, 12% malted barley.
Okay.
We do go through the Lincoln County process, so it does go through some sugar maple charcoal. Goes into a number 4 char barrel for a minimum of 4 years. I told my owners we're not touching it before it hits 4 years, and they honored that. So that's what we've done.
Awesome.
And then this product is also bottled at 85 proof. So it's a little bit lower. I know everyone's clamoring for those high proof whiskeys right now, but I think people will find this to be a very flavorful, very full-bodied whiskey, even at that lower proof.
Okay. Well, great. Well, speaking of that, Matt, since you're over there nosing it, you want to jump in and just share what you're picking up in terms of your tasting notes on this one?
Love to. It's got a really nice sweetness right on the front, like burnt sugar or brown sugar, like a caramelized type sweetness. I'm actually picking up like a little bit of kind of springtime flowers, sort of like a floral aroma, kind of like orchard type fruit aroma, but like a nice flowery type aroma with it as well. Good amount of oak, nice sweetness there as well. Good body to it, nice caramels, vanillas, little bit of that maple, maybe that like charred kind of smoky flavor coming across on the nose as well. But really nice, brings a whole lot to the table for an 85 proof whiskey. Really, really nice.
Yeah, and that's a good point, Matt, because a lot of these lower proof whiskeys that I've had, and I don't drink a lot of lower proof whiskeys, but when you drink them, the nose a lot of times it seems like I don't want to say it falls flat, but you just don't seem to pick up as many aromas off of the nose on those lower proofs, like the 80 proofs, 83, 85, 86. It just seems the nose a lot of times seems to kind of be lacking in aromas. So you don't get that opportunity to really pick up a lot until you go in for a taste of it. But with this, there's so much going on the nose. So it's really nice to see at 85 proof. And even the color on this one, looking at this, now that we have video, it's cool that we can show everybody when the video works. But, it has a nice darker, when I think, again, in the 80s, usually you're looking at almost that kind of straw yellow, pale gold kind of color. And this actually has a little bit more of an amber color to that. So very, very unique and very cool. But that brown sugar note you talked about, Matt, that sticks out to me big time on this one as well. Some fruity, maybe a little light cherry on this one. That brown sugar definitely comes through. So with all of that said, Alex, how do we do on that?
Absolutely fantastic. I think Matt must have a window open with a garden outside of it. He's getting all this spring floral. But no, 100%. All those sweet notes that both of you picked up on. We do a number 4 char on our barrel, which means we're getting those amazing caramelized wood sugars. And so those are coming through even with a 4 to 6 year old blend. Those are going to come through and come out. What amazes me is that for a 4 to 6 year blend, we do get the oak characteristic. Usually those are things that come later in a barrel's life, but it still comes out in a beautiful way, even at a young age. And Memphis, I'm not from Memphis. And so I really didn't know how aging barrels was going to be in this amazing high heat and humidity. And it turns out that Memphis is actually really good for whiskey. Part of the reason I think it does well at 85 proof, we go on the barrel at 110, and we're discovering that these barrels are coming out between 118 and 125.
Ooh, wow.
In 4 to 6 years.
Wow. Okay.
We are gaining some serious alcohol content in that short amount of time. So we're losing all that water, but it's leaving alcohol. So it's creating this super dense, super intense, flavorful whiskey inside the barrel that can hold up to that proofing down and can hold up to 85 proof. So it doesn't smell or taste watered down. It's still going to keep all that characteristic and be this phenomenal whiskey at a lower proof.
Yeah. So that's really impressive though too, that because I'm sorry, what you go in at what? At
110.
110. So this is even coming off of that 25 proof points, but you're still maintaining so many of those aromas and flavor, at least on the nose. We'll talk about the palate here shortly, but you're able to really maintain that. So that's really interesting. The way that environment in Memphis affects the barrels and the maturation process. But it allows you to cut it to 85, and you're still looking at a whiskey that doesn't smell or look like an 85 proof,
Right.
4 or 5 year old bourbon, right?
Yep.
Or Tennessee whiskey. I'm sorry.
Okay, come on. Tennessee whiskey is a bourbon. I might get kicked out of Tennessee for saying that, but Tennessee whiskeys are bourbon.
Well, here's a good point. I know probably most of our listeners understand what the Lincoln County process is, but you did mention that a few minutes ago. So can you just talk about that briefly, just to kind of share what that is for the people out there that may not know what the Lincoln County process stands for or means?
Absolutely. So to be a Tennessee whiskey, you take everything that makes a bourbon, copy and paste into a second column. For Tennessee whiskey, we do all those things, but then we also do one additional step, and that is the Lincoln County process. And that is we take our distillate, our raw distillate, before it goes in the barrel, and we pass it through sugar maple charcoal. And then also it has to be produced in Tennessee. There is technically a second box, I guess. Yeah, because everyone thinks bourbon has to be in Kentucky, and it's an American spirit. It's not a Kentucky spirit; it's American. Tennessee whiskey does have to be produced in Tennessee to have that label. What's funny is for the Lincoln County process, it was something that most of the country did as far as distilling was concerned, because people didn't understand fermentation. They didn't understand distillation. So everyone was actually filtering through charcoal of some kind for a very long time to try and clean it up. Then finally people understood science.
Yeah.
And so that started to go away, but Tennessee decided to own it and just make it part of our everyday whiskey. And so that's what we all continue to do up to this point.
So with your process, I'm just curious because I don't know a lot about the other Tennessee whiskeys, but I think I've read that it's like 10-foot tall vats of maple that it drips through and drains through. I mean, do you have like a 10-foot deep
We do
container?
not.
I was gonna say, I mean, that just seems kind of crazy to me that you have to have a 10-foot deep container filled with this charcoal to do this process.
We're fortunate that when the Tennessee distillers banded together all of it was less than a decade ago to define Tennessee whiskey, they understood that to go too specific would kind of pigeonhole us all to the same flavor profile.
Right.
Nobody wanted that. We all wanted to be able to make our own whiskey. And so they were very generous in their definition, which is great because us craft distillers, we can't afford to do it like some of the other guys who do have like 2-story vats and take 2 days to filter, because it's space. And a lot of us don't have space. A lot of it is money. And some of us don't have that money. And it's also time. A lot of what you do in production is based on timing and keeping a nice rhythm, and going through something like the Lincoln County process, depending on how you do it, can really throw that rhythm off. And small guys can't afford to figure out how that rhythm moves. And so, like for us at Old Dominic, we filter through, I think it's about a foot of sugar maple charcoal. And I haven't ever timed it. I think it takes about 30 seconds to go through it.
Okay.
Because
So
we just can't afford to do it any other way.
Yeah, you can't put it in a 10-foot vat and let it slow drip for a week. Yeah. So I'm just curious from a flavor profile perspective, does the new make spirit pick up aromas? I mean, I guess the theory is that the charcoal is going to strip out some of those congeners, some of the things that maybe came through in the distillation that you want to get rid of, those unnecessary or unwanted flavors. But how much does that, in your opinion, I'm just curious, how much does that change the flavor?
For ours, I would say it's on the minimal end because we do use so little. So it does help clean it up, absolutely. So if something does manage to make it through fermentation, does make it through distillation, it can help us clean up on that front. But because we do use so minimal, we're relying on the fact that we know how to control fermentation. We know how to control distillation, that hopefully by that point, we are not getting those off notes coming through that need to be removed.
Yep. And that makes perfect sense. Thank you for taking the time, though, to explain that. I think that's really helpful and it's helpful for me too, because I've always wondered in terms of the impact, what it really does, if you know, what the thought process behind that is. So Alex, we had you on the show way back September of 2020, over 2.5 years ago. So I think it would be good if we could do what I'll call the Alex Castle refresher. So if you don't care, can you just take some time and just kind of tell everybody listening out there, who you are, what your background is, and then how you got into the whiskey industry and what your journey's been like in that industry.
Yeah, absolutely. So Kentucky born and bred, which is funny because I just told you what Tennessee whiskey was. But Kentucky born and bred, grew up in a small town in northern Kentucky, just south of Cincinnati, Ohio, and had a midlife crisis at the age of 14 because I spent, if you know me, that's true. I really did. But thought I would be a marine biologist, and then took biology. It was awful, hated it, and didn't know what I was going to do with my life, and found chemistry, found physics, found the higher maths. And my mom said, study chemical engineering. And I said, wonderful. What in the world do you do with that? Because I cannot teach. I'm not a teacher. I will kill every student that comes through my classroom. To this day, I still believe that. So nothing has changed. And she said, you can make beer and be a master brewer, or you can make bourbon and be a master distiller. And I said, that sounds wonderful. Let's do this. To this day, I don't know why it sounded cool. I really don't. I have no idea, because neither of my parents really drank when I was that age. So we weren't really exposed to it, but it just, something inside me turned on, I guess. And ended up at the University of Kentucky, where I studied chemical engineering.
Go Cats.
Go Big Blue, man. I'm not allowed to say that in Memphis. They don't like it. They don't like it in Tennessee, let's be honest.
Yeah.
But was able to go through the program there. And something that you're encouraged to do when going through engineering is do a co-op, which is basically an internship. And I was lucky enough that the woman who ran or was responsible for the co-op office at UK was a full 100% German. And so when she had a student come to her and say, I want to make beer for a living, she was over the moon. She just jumped at the chance to figure out how to help me get into that industry, because that just wasn't something that was promoted at the time. And helped me get on in a company. It was small at the time, called Alltech. It was based in Nicholasville, Kentucky. And their main thing was animal nutrition supplements, but they also had a brewery called Kentucky Ale. And that's why I decided to go there, is they had that little brewery. It was going to get my foot in the door. What I didn't know is they were adding a distillery to their facility when I accepted the job, and they didn't have anyone to run it. And so a couple months in, had a couple different projects, and my boss said, do you want to observe a distillation? Said, that's wonderful. Let's do this. And my boss was Mark Hoffman. So was the master distiller at what is now Town Branch. And said, let's do it. So I show up at the distillery and the brewery, and he's like, oh, I'm so sorry. I have to take the boys to the dentist. That's true Mark Hoffman fashion. He always forgets what he has to do that day until it happens. And I thought I had to go to the office. And he said, no, we got this. Spent 5 minutes running through the entire distillation process. Looked at me and said, you got this, but if you don't, just turn the steam off. It's fine. I'll see you later. And then he left. First time running stills ever. I didn't stop smiling once that entire day. It was love at first sight. I think I was too excited to feel how nervous I should have felt at the time. But ended up from there spending 2 weeks with a retired distiller from Scotland that they had brought over, teaching me everything he knew. And to tell you how he taught, he was like, you know how you can tell when a still is ready to start boiling and send liquid over? And I said, no. And he literally just put his hand on the side of the pot still. He's like, that's how you do it. And with experience, you get faster at it. That's literally what my training was how fast can you touch the copper? But spent 2 weeks with him, learned as much as I could, and ultimately filled the first 100 or so barrels of what was Pierce Lyons Reserve whiskey, now Town Branch Bourbon. And then fast forward from there, spent a year after I graduated college making laundry detergent in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Got to meet Snuggle the bear because we made that fabric softener.
Yeah.
Definitely, it was the highlight of the year.
Highlight.
It's 100% the highlight. He's an amazing bear. And then was fortunate enough to get on Wild Turkey about a year after they commissioned their new production facility, and came in as kind of low man on totem pole in the production department, responsible for grain receiving, mashing, fermentation, distillation, byproduct treatment. And within 2 to 3 months, because of shifts, like shakeups in departments, ended up as the most senior supervisor in production and was responsible for first and third shift. So the schedule is as psychotic as it sounds. But it was also 4 of the best years of my life working for Wild Turkey, working for Campari. I got to study tequila. I got to study vodka. I got to all of it. It was an amazing time. And then in 2015, got a message on LinkedIn, completely unexpected, asking if I knew of anyone who might want to move to Memphis to help start up a craft distillery. And I've now been in Memphis for about 8 years.
That's awesome. There's so many things in that story to go back and revisit. And, the first one was the Mark Kaufman thing, because we had Mark on the show a couple of months ago. And, and he was telling us the story because he said, I was a brewer and I was working doing the beer. And Pierce came in one day and was basically just said, we're going to start a distillery and you're going to be the master distiller. And Mark's like, I had no idea what I was doing. And I'm like, that can't be a true story. But I mean, that's a true story.
100% true. I think Dr. Lyons was very much a whim kind of person. Just anyone that worked with him would tell you he was so lively, but also a little crazy just with those whims. And so he had the opportunity to buy these pot stills and said, sure, let's do it. To where if you've been to Town Branch, that place is beautiful now. And it's very spread out, very well laid out. It's not the case. They literally took fermenters in the brewery and shoved them into a corner to make room for these pot stills. And they had to put them up on a mezzanine, not only to reach the manways, but because we needed space for tanks. So we were literally just building on top of things because they just had to force it into this existing building. It was wonderful.
And then you went from there to Wild Turkey. I mean, well, you made laundry detergent for a year, but then you went to Wild Turkey. And then, and all of a sudden you're like running production. I just can't imagine in terms of the pressure did you feel a sense of pressure in doing that, being young, being kind of new to this still, and then being given this much responsibility and expected just to go do it?
Looking back, I should have felt a whole lot more pressure than I did. But I didn't. I think I was caught up in the excitement of it all. But I also was fortunate that I reported to the production manager, Jim Sanders, who'd been in the industry for, I don't even remember how long. And he helped lay out the new facility. I mean, he knew the place like the back of his hand. And so I was fortunate to have him as my mentor, my trainer. He was a very patient man, a very good manager, a very good leader, to where he helped, without holding my hand, held my hand and was able to show me all of the pitfalls that they experienced, what to expect, how to handle those things, to where the pressure really wasn't there. But on top of it, we also had a good maintenance team. So on those off shifts, when something would happen, I knew I had people I could call and could rely on. I didn't feel the pressure that I probably should have.
Oh, that's awesome. We're close to the end of round one. So let's jump back over to the whiskey real quick. And again, this is the 85, and I see we're on video, so I can hold the bottle up and show everybody. And these are beautiful bottles. We'll talk about those in the next round, the design, the label, and everything. The 85 proof Tennessee whiskey, 75, 13, 12. I wanted to make sure I had that mash bill correct. Matt, what do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on this one?
The palate on this, I get that sweet corn really comes through. Get like nice cornbread, like the kind of like baked type corn aroma with it. And then there's like a nuttiness that I'm picking up as well. Kind of like a sweet, brittle type nuttiness, maybe a little peanut or even like a subtle walnut to it. Good oak, good vanilla, nice long, like rich finish with it as well. For 85 proof, it definitely brings a lot of flavor, a lot of depth, a lot of profile to it as well. It's nice that the subtle flavors are there. It's not just that you're picking out the main characteristics one might pick out that show up in a lower proof bourbon, but there's also some complexity and some playfulness with it as well that I really enjoy.
I can't say it any better, Matt. I mean, brown sugar, vanilla, a little bit of leather. That's about it for me. So, Alex, I'm just going to say, how did Matt do on his tasting notes on that?
Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic. Because with that high corn content, especially at the younger age, you're going to get the corn. You're going to get that cornbread, which I love. I think it's wonderful. But again, because that number 4 char, you do get those amazing toffees, caramels, vanillas, those baking spices between the barrel and the rye. Those are going to come through. I typically get creme brulee, so I get like kind of a toasted sugar. Yeah.
Definitely. Well, we appreciate you sharing this with us for sure, and I'm a fan of it. And I'm usually not a lower proof whiskey drinker, but this one fits right in the wheelhouse. Great flavors, even at 85 proof. It's one that I could easily enjoy. Matt, what do you think?
I think it's positively delightful.
You can't get better than that. So, all right. Well, I'll tell you what, let's take a quick break. Let's get a word from our sponsors, and we'll be back with more with Alex Castle, the master distiller at Old Dominick Distillery, in just a minute.
From our good friends at The Stave comes Lexington's newest hot spot to meet up with friends, have fun, and eat some great food. District 7 Social is a social and beer hall, but it's a lot more than that. Located in Lexington's Distillery District, it's the home of Lexington's first duck pin bowling lanes, and it also features a self-serve beer wall. That's right, self-serve. And if you want more, they've got it. You can try one of their delicious cocktails from the bar or order some great German fusion food from their on-site eatery, Germanish. So what are you waiting for? Be seen, be social. District 7 Social.
The Stave Restaurant is a bourbon lover's paradise right here in the heart of bourbon country. Located at 5711 McCracken Pike in Millville, Kentucky, between Castle and Key and Woodford Reserve, Chef Kyle Klatka prepares amazing food each day that features an elevated Kentucky-inspired cuisine. With a full-service bar, great bourbon flights, and signature cocktails, the Stave is the perfect place to catch up with friends after a fun-filled day of touring the local distilleries. Be sure to check them out online at thestavekentucky.com or at Instagram and Facebook at The Stave Kentucky.
All right, everybody, welcome back for round 2 of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight here live in the Bourbon Life studios, it's my good friend, Matt. Matt, how you doing out there, buddy?
Hey, Mark, I'm doing great out here. How are you doing in the office, in the control center, in the in Mission Control?
Center. Mission Control, that's right.
Yeah.
Thankfully, Houston, we do not have a problem tonight. So
far,
so far we're good to go, man. This is great. So I'm happy. We're drinking great bourbon, or I'm sorry, I keep saying that. We're drinking great whiskey. Yeah, sorry about that. We're drinking great Tennessee whiskey with a great guest. So I'm excited about that. I do have to say we are the Bourbon Life Podcast, presented by Old Dominick Distillery. We appreciate their support, and we appreciate the support of all of our sponsors. And with that said, Matt, do you want to tell everybody who we have with us tonight, please?
I would love to. Speaking of great guests, she is back for round number 2, and she's the master distiller at Old Dominick Distillery in Memphis, Alex Castle. Alex, welcome back. We're so glad to have you for round 2.
Thank you for having me. I hope y'all are doing all right. Hanging in there?
Hanging in there tonight for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. Last night, we tried to do this last night, and I don't know. We weren't hanging too cool last night.
Yeah. So I wasn't going to mention it, but now that we have mentioned it.
Cat's out of the bag.
Cat's out of the bag. So Alex graciously agreed to come back tonight because last night it was the word cluster and there's a way to describe it. And last night was the culmination of every worst nightmare you could have with technology. I went to bed after we just said, let's scrap it. We'll do it again. I went upstairs and just like, that's it. My day's over. I'm done.
That's all you can do. That's all you can do at that point.
Honestly. But I appreciate you graciously agreeing to come back and join us. I mean, after 2.5 years, we had to make this happen, Alex.
Absolutely. A lot has happened in 2.5 years.
Yeah, it absolutely has, including what we're drinking. You like that segue there?
Yeah, nice. Yeah. Get on and take a ride because you're on the Segway right there, man. Ooh. I like that. Yes. Alex, can you please share with us what we have poured up for this round?
Yeah, so round 2 for us is going to be our Bottle and Bond Tennessee whiskey. So it's going to be that same mash bill from round 1. So that's 75% corn, 13% rye, 12% malted barley, but Bottle and Bond version. So minimum 4 years old, can be bottled at 100 proof. It all comes from the same production season. What we're sipping tonight is batch number 1. So this is a batch that was released back in the fall. It was actually a distillery only release. It just so happened that a couple cases found their way into East Tennessee for grains and grits.
Yes.
Of course, I don't know if people knew what they were missing out on when we took it out there, but that's how it made it out there. And this particular batch was from our spring 2017 production. So our very first production season at the distillery.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
It's our oldest vintage. So, and based on when we bottled it, it would have been 5 years old.
Okay. All right. So it is a minimum 4 years old, of course, to be bottled in bond, but these are 5 years old. Yeah. And I'd have to say it was nice. I think that was the first time that I actually got to meet you in person.
I think so.
You on the show. Yeah, we had you on the show back about 2.5 years ago. But then I was at Grains and Grits. Thanks to John Edwards from Dad's Drinking Bourbon. Not that he listens to our podcast, but he's a great guy. I love him to death. And speaking of big teddy bears, like Snuggle Bear, John Edwards.
He is Snuggle Bear. He's Snuggle Bear in human form.
He is Snuggle Bear in person. Yes, I agree 100%. Just a great guy. Got me tickets. So my wife and I got to go to spend the weekend in Gatlinburg and got to go to Townsend and did the Grains and Grits. It's such a fun festival, all Tennessee focused. So many great distilleries and products and great food. And I got to meet Alex. I mean, come on. What more could you ask for? And I did pick up this bottle. And I think you had the 85 proof there as well, maybe. I skipped buying it because it was 85 proof. Now, see what I missed out on? I shouldn't have done that.
But yeah. You couldn't get batch 1 anywhere else, though.
Right.
You can get 85 proof across the state of Tennessee now. So you're fine.
Okay.
You made a smart choice.
Well, thank you very much. And speaking of which, we talked about the bottles. Again, thank goodness for video, right? These bottles are so cool, Alex. I mean, the glass, the bottom, it's got the little edging in it, the ribs, it's got the name of the distillery, the label. It looks, it looks like an older bottle, something from the turn of the century almost. I mean, the labeling, the text, everything's really cool on this.
No, I love that you say that because one, we spend the better part of the year designing that entire package. If you've never designed spirits packaging, don't do it because it's terrible. But we were trying to strike a balance between who we are today in this new modern world, but also our roots that date back to 1866. And we have these old bottles, and it was how do we honor our heritage while also still embracing the new version of who we are.
Yeah. Well, you did a great job because they're beautiful bottles. I love the way they look. And again, the size from a bartender's perspective, I'm sure that they love them as well because they're just that right size. You can grab them by the neck, grab them by the body of the bottle. So I'm assuming that probably had some part of it as well.
That was a huge part of it. We've learned through some of our other packaging decisions that we either chose really wisely with bottle shape and whatnot, and other times we didn't choose so wisely. And they let us know, the bartenders let us know how terrible the bottle is. And so in designing this, when you're doing custom, you get various versions of it, including a plastic version of your bottle, which never feels right. But We literally were carrying it around the distillery for weeks on end, handing it to people saying, do this, do that. How do you feel about it? How's your hand fit on it? Because we all have different hand sizes, to try and make sure that we ended up with a bottle that worked for people doing tastings. Like our Huling station bottle, I struggle to pour out of it. My hand's just not big enough for that square bottle. Right. So like people pouring, at a tasting, but also bartenders, you're not grabbing the center of the bottle, you're grabbing the neck. And we put that bottle through the ringer. Yeah.
Very, very nice design. Just a beautiful bottle, like I said. So, and easy to see. When you see that bottle, you know what it is. So it stands out. But Matt, I did what I used to do, and I can't believe I did it. I forgot to talk about the nose, and I started just getting all these questions in. So
I was just going to let you go. You were rolling.
Matt, I'm going to jump back on my segue and roll backwards a little bit. Okay.
That sounds dangerous.
Yeah.
Segue, I think it would segue in reverse.
Yeah. Especially after a pour and a half. So Matt, let's roll it back a little bit. Let's talk about the nose on this one. What do you pick up on this bottled in bond Tennessee whiskey?
The nose on this is very much just like a very amplified version of the 85 proof that we were just sipping on. I get a big nose of the cornbread really comes through on this, kind of that baked corn, baking spices. It kind of smells like a kitchen would smell when one would be baking like a really nice cornbread or a nice loaf of bread, or just some like almost a sweet dessert type nose to it as well. But I taste, and I don't taste, I smell more of the rye on this. I think more of that rye influence comes out. There's a little bit herbal, a little bit of grassy note on it as well. But I think as we get some more proof, and this is 5 years old, more of that oak, more mature notes come across too, a little bit more oak, little tobacco, more of the barrel influence, more of those toasted notes from that heavy number 4 char come across as well. And I'm curious, Alex, was the decision to roll out a bottle and bond right away really important to you all to do that?
100%. So in starting the launch of this, knew we wanted kind of an everyday sipper. So that's where the 85 kind of came from. I wanted it to be affordable, approachable. And if you wanted to pour it every day, you could. But my sales team also wanted a quote unquote higher end product. Like, I don't even know what that means. Like, what do you do with that? And of course, Ball and Bond's starting to come online. People are talking about it. They're loving it. And I loved the idea of it for multiple reasons. One, we are the first distillery putting a Memphis whiskey out from start to finish. And yes, so that's great with 85. But when you say Ball and Bond, you're guaranteeing that every drop of whiskey in that bottle came out of your distillery. Mm-hmm. And so it guaranteed that everything in that bottle was 100% Memphis produced. And so to be able to get out in front and say, this is us, it felt crucial. But also from a distiller standpoint, Ball and Bond means it's from the same distiller. And so for me personally, to be at a point in my career where I'm able to actually put out a Ball and Bond, it allowed me to kind of have a moment to myself and be like, hey, I did it.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
really cool.
It is great. I like the transparency in it as well. It's well put out what it needs to be bottled in bond, and even on your packaging as well, on your bottles, on the back, right on the front, you list the mash bill, right? And then on the back, it gives a lot of info right about it, barrel entry proof, barrel size of the batch. So full transparency. I love that.
I've always believed in transparency. This industry, some people like to do smoke and mirrors. I have never understood it. I, as a consumer, always wanted to know everything about what I was drinking. And so as a producer, I want to do that same thing for my consumers. We don't do anything that is secretive. We don't do anything we're all doing the same thing. So just tell us what you're doing. And so that's what we wanted on our label.
Yeah, and that's cool. And that goes back to the initial releases of the Huling Station, because you all, that was being contract distilled for you all, but you all were transparent about that. And that was the first brand that came out from you guys. And then, you roll out your Old Dominic, which is your produced distillate there in Memphis. And so I think Matt is onto something there with that transparency and just, being very transparent about that. Last time on the show, we drank the Huling Station, and now we get to drink the Old Dominic. So we've had the opportunity to do them both, which is really cool.
It's great that we've been around long enough for you to be able to do both.
And we won't wait another 2.5 years before we do it again, right, Matt?
Yeah, let's please not wait that long.
Yeah. So let's talk about transparency, talk about the brand. Can you talk a little bit about the history, because it is a really cool and unique story of the family and the brand itself. So can you share that with our listeners?
Absolutely. Our brand, more so our parent company, dates back to the 1800s. A man by the name of Domenico Canali came over to Memphis from Italy in 1859. He had family in Memphis, so that's why he settled there. Started working with his uncle, who had a food distributorship in Memphis. Kind of learned the ropes, figure out what it was to do that. And in 1866, founded D. Canali and Company. And it was, again, like his uncle, it was food and fruit distributorship. He'd have a cart rolling up and down Front Street with a horse, selling fruit to the citizens of Memphis at the time. And shortly thereafter decided he wanted to found a whiskey company as well. Didn't start his own distillery, didn't produce it himself, but would source barrels from Kentucky, Ohio, Indiana. We even have a receipt for a distillery from Cincinnati, Ohio, where I grew up. And he would bring those barrels down to Memphis on rail cars, blend it, and bottle it under his own private label that he decided to call Old Dominic. Because, you're going to name it after yourself. It's the easiest thing you can do. And it was a very popular brand before Prohibition. But of course, Prohibition hit. And Old Dominic had to cease its existence. Fortunately for us, the company continued on. D. Canali continued with his food distributorship, even added a beer distributorship. Because if you're distributing fruit, you have refrigerated warehouses and trucks. Beer is not pasteurized, so it needs those same pieces of equipment. This was a natural extension. And so D. Canali and Company had a beer distributorship for 80 plus years. Unfortunately, whiskey never came back because our brand champion, Domenico, passed away right when Prohibition started. So we didn't have anyone to fight to bring us back. But fast forward, 1999, we sell off the food distributorship. 2010, we sell off the beer distributorship. That takes us to our current leadership, who is Domenico's great-great-grandson, Chris Canali Jr. And he's in his 30s at this point. So he's young and trying to figure out what his legacy is. What's his footprint on D. Canali? What is he leaving for his sons? And someone sees these bottles of Old Dominick whiskey in our corporate office and say, people would pay good money for that brand. And he said, ooh, no, I'm going to bring it back. I'm going to bring it back, but in a big way. So instead of doing what Domenico did, where he sourced whiskey, Chris decided he wanted to make whiskey. So in 2013, 2014, they set about rebuilding Old Dominic as a much bigger concept than it ever was. And in 2015, I joined the team. We finished the build out, started distilling December of 2016, and opened our doors to the public in May of 2017.
It's a great story. I love it. The family history and everything, and the fact the great grandson came back to rebuild it. But I do have to ask, what's up with the rooster? Okay. That's the question I think everybody wants to know. The rooster that's on everything.
The rooster's important. So that rooster appeared on an original label, pre-Prohibition product called the Dominic Toddy. And this is a bottle that we actually had in 2013, 2014 when the project restarted. It was a full bottle. It was wax sealed. And we now make that as the Memphis Toddy. But on that label are these two chickens. They're not roosters. They were chickens back then. They were not tough enough to be roosters. But we had someone in the family office see that bottle. And it was a good old farm boy, sees them and says, well, those are Dominic chickens. And everyone in the office just kind of stopped and stared at him like, hold on, what? And it turns out Dominicker chickens are the oldest breed of chicken in America. Very hardy breed. And we believe they were put on this bottle because if you think about the 1800s, there were a lot of people who could not read. But a lot of those people most likely understood farming and livestock. And so they would have recognized a Dominicker chicken. So if they couldn't read Dominic on the label, they knew Dominic chickens.
That makes sense. Yeah,
And
that's really cool.
we decided to keep him around. So we kind of revamped him. He's a little tougher now than he was back in the 1800s. And we named him Nico after Domenico.
Nice.
And so now you see him holding either a shot glass or a martini glass in his claw.
And he's on your rooftop, right? In downtown Memphis, right?
We loved him so much that we turned him into a 13-foot tall neon sign.
Oh,
That's
man.
how I want my
That's
legacy to
awesome.
end.
Right?
Oh, that's great. So a quick question in regards to Memphis. We kind of mentioned it about the weather and everything, but you guys, you're in downtown, pretty much downtown Memphis, right?
Yeah.
I'm just curious from a production standpoint, from everything that goes on. I mean, how does that operate? Can you talk about that a little bit? Because it sounds weird. I mean, I guess you think Whiskey Row, yeah, there's some distilleries there in Louisville, but you just don't. I don't know. I still have a hard time wrapping my head. I just think these countryside distilleries out there in the mountains or the hollers or whatever distilling, and I don't think downtown major metropolis. Can you talk about that a little bit?
Well, I mean, most of Whiskey Row, their bulk of their production doesn't happen there. It's elsewhere.
Right.
And for good reason. Being an urban distillery it's not ideal by any means. So we're about a block and a half from Beale Street and about a block and a half from the river. So, and across the river is a floodplain. So no farmers whatsoever. So we have no disposal of our stillage, so our byproduct. We have no one to come pick it up. We're working on that, but it's taken 7 years to get there.
Wow.
For the first couple years, trucks would come to deliver glass, barrels, whatever it was, and they couldn't find us, even though they're staring at a 13-foot tall rooster. Couldn't find us, refused to turn into our driveway because it's a standard driveway. It's designed for trucks, but it looks standard. So they're like, oh, I can't make that turn. So there are frequently times we were having to take a forklift onto the street to load or unload a truck. Like it has its challenges. And on top of it all, we have a decent sized building. It's 60,000 square feet. But it's amazing how quickly you fill it up. And when you're urban, we literally have apartments and condos behind us. We've got condos to one side. They're building something to the other side. There is nowhere to expand.
Yeah.
Nowhere to expand. And we need warehousing off of our main property. But we need to age it in Tennessee because we have Tennessee whiskey. And normally you have a 10-mile radius. But Memphis is in the corner of Tennessee, so it's a pie wedge. So we no longer have a 10-mile radius. We have just a tiny little wedge to find warehousing for.
Wow, I hadn't thought about that challenge in terms of the warehousing.
Neither had we.
Yeah, and so obviously you're figuring. Well, I'll tell you what. Let's talk about the whiskey. We come back. We can kind of finish that because I'm curious to know how you're solving that problem. I think that'll be a good conversation to kick off with for round 3. But Matt, let's close out round 2. Let's talk about the palate and the finish on this bottled in bond Tennessee whiskey.
All right. Nice and spicy on the palate. I like it. A lot of baking spices, some of that cinnamon, a little clove and nutmeg come across as well with it. Then it leads to some sweetness. I pick up, it's like a bright sweetness. I can sort of think of it as like crystallized ginger or caramelized ginger, where there's this sugary sweetness, but also this like kind of pucker fact, this brightness to it as well that you might think maybe from ginger. Good amount of oak with it as well. Nice vanillas, those great barrel characteristics, kind of the toasty vanillas, graham cracker type flavors, and then a good long, spicy finish that really comes through with more of that rye spice, more of the peppercorn, a little bit of those baking spices as well, but just a nice, long, warming, good palate finish.
Yeah, and I get cherry on this one. So I always say vanilla and caramel.
Those are safe bets.
I'm the Denny Potter of podcasting. Vanilla and caramel is my standard answer on everything. But cherry, I'm going to go out on a limb here. Cherry, that burnt sugar, the brown sugar, comes through as well for me, Matt. That rye spice does, and even only 13%, right? But you still get that nice rye sensation, that heat on the tongue, and the cinnamon and that sugar. It's really a nice combination. It's almost like a red hot cinnamon candy that you're sucking on, like you had as a kid, or I did anyway. But yeah, I really enjoy it. But that brown sugary, that burnt sugar sweetness as well comes through, and the oak does come through. And again, 5 years old, it doesn't drink at all to me like when you think of a 5-year-old whiskey, you just don't think of something that drinks like this, as complex and well balanced as it is. How do we do?
Good. No. What I love about this mash bill is you can get rye out of it. It doesn't have to be in your face rye. So if you're not a rye whiskey drinker, you shouldn't be turned off completely by it. But you can get those amazing rye notes, and especially the baking spice notes associated with it. But that corn content, it does give it that sweetness in the barrel. But what's fun about the Ball and Bond for me is we're now up to batch 4. So we released batch 1 and 2 in the fall, and then batch 3 and 4 in the spring. Each one's a different production season up to this point. So they're all very, very different from when they were produced. I'm not targeting a single flavor profile. I am going through and tasting barrels from each season and letting the barrels kind of tell me where they need to go, what they want to be, to where all 4 of the batches we've done so far, completely different from each other.
Yeah, very, very nice. And I think let's take a quick break, and then we'll come back and we can talk some more about that. Because I know I can see he's on the edge of his seat. He really wants to follow up on that point you just made. So Matt, here's the Bourbon Life cliffhanger. So that'll bring everybody back for the third and final round, right? So, but everybody just sit tight. We'll be back with more with Alex Castle, the Master Distiller at Old Dominick Distillery, in just a minute.
Three Chord's line of whiskeys embody the spirit of creativity. The whiskey is a true collaboration between producer and composer Neil Giraldo and master blender distiller Ari Sussman. The 3 Chord team of expert blenders, coopers, and sensory professionals have developed a multi-step process they call Perfectly Tuned Taste. This process begins by carefully selecting the finest bourbon and rye whiskeys from Kentucky, Tennessee, and Indiana, and then blending them together. Find out more about the whiskeys and distribution in your area at www.3chordbourbon.com.
All right, everybody, welcome back for the third and final round of the Bourbon Life Podcast. I'm your host, Mark, and with me tonight, live here in the Bourbon Life Studios, is my good friend, Matt. Matt, thanks for sticking around for round 3, buddy.
Hey, Mark, I wouldn't leave you high and dry for round 3 for anything. I'm so glad to be back.
Well, I'm not dry. I've been drinking, and I'm getting kind of high. No, I'm just kidding.
What?
I'm all good, man. So, all right. I better say we are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Old Dominick Distillery. We appreciate their support. We appreciate the support of all of our sponsors. Matt, we got a lot to cover, so I'm not even going to joke around, man. Let's just get to it. Tell everybody who we have with us tonight.
Absolutely. Speaking of Old Dominick Distillery, we have with us the master distiller of Old Dominick Distillery, Alex Castle. Welcome back for round 3 of the Bourbon Life Podcast.
Thank you. I feel like we just got started, so I'm not sure how it's round 3 already.
Right.
Well, this is really round 5 for us, I think.
Yeah, this is
round 5 or 6.
night 2, round 13,
or 13, or
who knows?
However many rounds. Yeah. Anyway, so, oh yes, thanks for sticking with us and hanging out with us tonight. So we left on a cliffhanger. Matt, I know you wanted to follow up on the batching process and how they blend the batches. So you want to jump in?
So before we get to what we're drinking, I do want to jump back to that real quick. So that's got to be a super fun experience doing your batches so differently, and especially going into the barrel at 110 proof, and you said coming out at 118 to 125. the concentration of flavors and different flavors and profiles that you're getting out of each individual barrel, that would be probably next to impossible to keep a profile consistent. So that's got to be super fun to just let the barrels drive and hold on for the ride, right?
Oh, absolutely. For me, because I come more from distilling than blending. And so to me, to go through and taste all these barrels, see how unique they are, how they honestly all hold up on their own, and then try to start playing with them together has been so much fun. And then to be fortunate enough to be with a team who gives me the leeway. They don't dictate what these batches need to be, what they are. They just trust that I'm gonna do the best thing. And so I really do. I get to just have fun. I just get to spend time with the barrels, and they lead me where they need to go.
That's so cool.
That's very cool. And these are 6-barrel batches.
They are. We do typically do 6-barrel batches. I will say batch number 4 of Bourbon was a unique one. That was a production season. It was fall 2018. We were about to go into a shutdown, a year-long shutdown for warehouse space. So we produced very, very little whiskey in that production season, but I still wanted to use it. And so I actually had to do a 4-barrel batch for batch number 4. So it was actually even a smaller batch than what we typically do.
Gotcha. And I know when we did the show before 2.5 years ago, when we had the Huling station, that was the same thing. You were doing the same thing with those, right? You were using those 6-barrel blends, correct?
Yep. We basically blend and bottle from 270-gallon stainless steel totes. So that's honestly what is dictating our batch size.
I gotcha. That makes sense. And Matt, did you like that segue talking about
that? Was smooth.
The Huling station, because what we have poured up this round.
Yeah.
Alex, or Matt, if you want to say what you've got, because you brought the bottle.
Sure. So I'll just read through the label real quick, and Alex can kind of talk to us about what we've got. So this is a Huling Station single barrel. This is a pick from Liquor Barn here in Kentucky, and it is a 6-year, 115.81 proof, and this is the high rye recipe. So Alex, we want to tell us just a quick little bit about what we've got here.
Yeah, so our Huling Station line of whiskeys is all going to be contract distilled. Currently, it's all custom for us. So we were partnered with MGP starting in 2014. They made a high rye bourbon mash bill as well as a wheat whiskey mash bill for us. And so Huling Station will continue to be contract distilled. So if you see it in that label, that's what that is. And what we're sipping is our high rye bourbon mash bill. This is 52% corn, 44% rye, and then 4% malted barley. And if you know your whiskey mash bills, you know that to be a rye, you have to be at least 51% rye. So we are so close, so close to being a rye whiskey, which is what I love about this mash bill is it is a bourbon, but it's so close to being a rye. It's the best of both worlds. You get the sweetness, including some corn sweetness from the 52% corn, but you still get a lot of that amazing rye baking spice and everything you associate with rye. But I'm also finding people who say, I don't like rye whiskey, still can drink this bourbon because it's balanced with the corn.
You know, it's funny when we have distillers on and they're talking about their ryes, they're 51%, we call them the barely legal ryes. So this is like a barely legal bourbon, right? I mean, you're 52%. So you're just right over that limit there. So Matt, since you brought this one, I'm just going to let you jump in since you give the great descriptors.
We'll see about that.
I'm just going to sit here. I'm going to sit here and drink, and you just go ahead and talk about it. How does that work out?
So for 44% rye, I'm actually quite surprised that the nose on this is not as rye forward as I was expecting. I almost feel like I'm nosing a good bit of the little 4% barley. It has kind of like a chocolate roasty note to it, which is kind of almost like a Tootsie Roll kind of type, like chocolatey sweetness to it. But there definitely is the rye when you come and let it get some air and let it swirl around in the glass a little bit. Those rye spices, the baking spices, kind of the darker cinnamon, cardamoms, some of those. But I also picked up like a little brightness from some grass, like a little parsley, some herbs with it too. And I think the corn sweetness really plays through kind of in that like chocolatey candy type nose that I'm picking up. But really, really lovely, of course.
It's funny, Matt, because you said Tootsie Roll, and it's almost like, to me, almost like cola, almost, or maybe almost like possibly even like root beerish. I know that sounds kind of weird.
No, I think you're absolutely, you're right there. There is kind of like a cola or root beer, almost like a licorice or anise type kind of flavor too.
And it's like a dark sugar aroma as well with that kind of blends in with those other flavors that, to me, it just kind of presents as that. It's almost, like a root beer to me. It's really unique. And again, that corn sweetness, I'm sure, plays into that. And I know, Alex, we can't say, we're going to throw it to you.
No, because I don't even know it's been so long since I've had that barrel. But I know a lot of our Huling Station bourbon barrels typically do have a lot of dark chocolate notes, typically a lot of dark cherry notes. Frequently get what I consider like dark brown sugar, and toffee and caramel, which some of those combined would absolutely give you kind of a cola-esque, feel. But also kind of like our Ball and Bond, when I sit down and evaluate barrels for our single barrel program, I'm not looking for a single flavor profile. I am looking for barrels that, one, have no faults. All right, we don't need it to smell or taste like sulfur. Nobody wants that. But I'm looking for barrels with their own complexity. I don't like single barrels. That's not fun. If it's just a cherry bomb, what's the point? And so I'm looking for complexity. But I also know, like, Matt, maybe you like super dry dark chocolate whiskey as well. Someone else wants oak forward or spice forward. It's not about me, it's about everyone else. And so I qualify so many different flavor profiles that what you're tasting right now, go and buy another barrel tomorrow, and you might be able to tell that it's from the same family, but it's not going to be the same barrel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's the fun of single barrels, right? It really
I think so.
So kind of a follow-up question on single barrels. Are you doing anything with the Old Dominic line in terms of single barrels at this point, or are there single barrel picks, or is that coming?
It's coming. So like so many small distilleries, it's a balancing act on what we were able to do when we were able to do it, to where I have to be very protective of our inventory, because I also know my sales team's going to want a 10-year-old at some point. They may not realize that today, but they're gonna want it. So I gotta protect the barrels. But we do actually have some single barrel Tennessee whiskeys that'll be distillery only later this year. So some super special things coming out in that way. And then with any luck, we'll be able to do some next year at the earliest, 2025 at the absolute latest.
Gotcha. Now, will those be like the distillery releases you're talking about? Are those going to be barrel proof single barrels, or will you have?
I don't personally believe in doing a single barrel that is proof down.
Okay.
So if we do a single barrel, it's going to be cask strength.
Awesome. Matt, it sounds like it's time for a road trip.
Yeah, no kidding. I'm trying to think of what great events are coming up in Memphis and try to predict the future here.
But, on the way down there, Alex, we'll be sure to look around on the drive to see if there's any space, going back to your warehousing issue. So let's touch back on that from round two real quick, because I'm curious. I can't get that out of my mind. How are you guys solving that problem, and what are you doing to work on that?
So we were fortunate that there is a spot. I don't want to be too descriptive because I try to keep it on the radar where it is, but we did find a place within a mile of the distillery on the Tennessee side that's more industrial. And so, because something we have to consider, and a lot of people don't know it, when you're in the beverage alcohol industry, you have to consider, depending on where you're located, distance to schools, distance to churches, because you're not allowed to be zoned within those, even for storage. And so you have to take all that into account. And we managed to find some land, had a small warehouse on it, and it had enough property we were able to then build a larger warehouse on it. So I think we're set for the next 4 years.
Okay. That's good.
Which is the best we've been in, but 4 years will go by so fast to where we definitely have to be looking at what the next solution is.
Yeah, and we won't wait those 4 years to have you back on the show. So we'll at least
Please don't.
No, oh, not at all. But now you have been really busy, and I meant to talk about this in the first round, but that's the way the podcast rolls. Sometimes we get on our segues, Matt and I, and just roll on through and forget to talk about things. But you have been extremely busy these past few weeks with the Tennessee whiskey. Can you talk about what's been going on?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mentioned earlier, we did release our Tennessee whiskey, both the 85 proof and the Ball and Bond in Memphis back in the fall of 2022. But we started launching it, in our other markets starting beginning of this year. And the last week saw me, my sales team, members of our marketing team, literally on the road, traveling across the entire length of Tennessee and back as we launched this product across the state with our various partners. And so we started in Nashville, then we hit up Chattanooga, then we did Knoxville, back to Nashville, all the way doing barrel picks with bourbon groups, doing dinners with some of our top restaurants across the state, and doing in-store tastings with, every store you can think of in the state.
That's a busy schedule.
It was a lot. I'm so glad we did it. It was amazing, but I am not sure I'm ever going to say yes to that again.
That's a long drive. Me too. I have driven Tennessee east to west. That's a long drive. It's so fortunately I didn't drive. Thankfully they spared me that. But we did check it. And by the time I got dropped off at my house on Friday, we had hit 1,050 miles.
Wow. Yeah. That's a lot. Yeah. And then you get back
in
to
less
the
than 5 days.
Yeah. And then you get back to the distillery and there's all the other stuff that that's waiting for you.
Yeah. Work doesn't stop simply because you're on the road.
Oh gosh. Yeah. I can't even begin to imagine. So one thing I wanted to ask you, you're talking about the barrel entry proof. And this is, round 3, we can kind of nerd out a little bit, but, going in at 110, the industry, you got to go in at least 125 or less. And choosing that 110 option though, that does create additional cost because you're having to use more barrels because you're proofing down. What do you guys, when you're coming off the still, how much are you going down to get to that 110?
So we target to come off our still at 130.
Okay.
And so we're going to go from that 130 down to 110.
So you're adding some water in, which will aid in the maturation process. But then of course you're losing a lot of that water, which is condensing that alcohol and concentrating that, pulling those flavors in. But that's a really unique thing for a craft distillery, someone starting out. That's a big decision to make, to say, okay, we're going to go in at 110, where you could just go in at 125 and save some money, right?
Absolutely. And save space, because
yes.
that's always been an issue for us. But I chalk it up to being trained at the bigger guys. I'm used to going in at that lower proof. And so I saw benefit of it. Now, I did not anticipate our whiskey going up a solid 10 to 15 proof points in 4 to 6 years.
Yeah.
But I also think that now looking back, that shows us that it really was the right move for us to do, because I'm not sure I would want to go in at 125 and gain additional 15 proof points on top of it, because what's that flavor profile going to be? Personally, I think it'd be it'd be too hot.
Yeah, that's a good. Well, for me, it wouldn't, but
well, no, I'll do a barrel at a higher proof just for you.
Thank you, Alex. I appreciate that. So in terms of percentage, like people talk about the angel share and your percentage loss. I mean, what kind of standard, do you have an average loss that you guys are experiencing per year on these barrels?
So it hasn't been as high as I would think. We're still kind of early on in it for me to rely too terribly much on our averages. But we seem to be losing in the 4 to 6 years about probably 10 to 15 gallons per barrel. So, I mean, we're losing a fair amount, but when you take into account the proof increase,
right? Yeah.
It kind of helps offset that.
Yeah. Because you take that, what's left over, that's at 118, and you're proofing it down to either the 100 or the 85. So so that makes a lot of sense. Kind of a trade-off there, but I think the trade-off reflects in the quality and the flavor, obviously, of what you're putting out, and what we've been tasting. So, you talked a few minutes ago about kind of the freedom and experimentation and things like that, and the things that you do. I saw on Instagram today that I think you guys have something coming out, well, tomorrow, which will be 2 days ago by the time the show comes out. But you have a distillery release coming out, and it just seems like you do have a lot of freedom to do some fun things down there. Can you talk about how important that is to you?
Yeah. So I guess it was 2018 at this point when we created the R&D line at the distillery. And so it's a distillery only product line. And it started with gin because we had gin developed, had liquid, it was ready to go in the bottle, but we couldn't decide on packaging. And so I wasn't about to let the liquid go to waste. And so I was like, hey, let's create this distillery only release. It'll be easy, crank it out. Who cares? And that line is still going to this day. And it has actually helped us basically salvage some not great product. So our first gin distillation, we didn't know what we were doing. And we ended up with a licorice bomb of a gin. I mean, it was just pure licorice root, not what we were going for. And I was like, crap, we got to do something with this. Well, how do you mellow flavor? You put it in a barrel.
Right.
We had barrels. So we put it in the used bourbon barrel, and we ended up with a beautiful barrel rested gin. And it was a way to salvage that 50 gallons of gin that otherwise would have gone down the drain. Basically didn't cost us anything, and we saved money. Same with, we did developing our vodka. Do we do this mash bill or that mash bill? Well, we ended up with a tote of 100% corn vodka and nothing to do with it. Well, we put it in a barrel and then infused it with coffee beans.
Oh, wow.
And we ended up with a coffee-infused vodka that we've now done twice. But it was, again, to salvage product that we were never going to do. So it's given us that. It helps us save some of our bad decisions or mistakes. But it's also given us creative freedom, because with that vodka, it was, I went to my team and said, what do you want to do with this? What flavors do you guys like? And they said coffee. I said, look, let's do it. So we partnered with a local roaster, and they taught me how to roast coffee beans. And then we created that. So we've partnered with multiple roasters now to create that. And then the most fun one that we've done so far has been with a brewery here in town called Memphis Brewing. They took 15 or so of our barrels a couple of years ago, made 5 different beers, and just had a heyday with it. Went super crazy with their flavors. Probably went more expensive on ingredients than they normally would do, because they did 8 barrels each, so not a ton. And then they said, why don't you take some of these barrels back? Let's, put some bourbon in it. I said, that's wonderful. And the first of those was the All the Cookies bourbon. And it's an oatmeal raisin cookie ale. They ferment on the raisins. They put vanilla beans in the barrel. They go all out with it. And we took it back, and it became an oatmeal raisin cookie bourbon.
Oh, gosh.
And it's amazing. And we've done it 3 years in a row now. And this product that is releasing this week is kind of an extension of that collaboration. It's the first one we've done of this beer, but it was a coconut, I think it was a porter or a stout. I always forget which one. And so we took it back, put bourbon in it. So now we have a coconut bourbon.
Yeah.
Much more subtle than the cookies one, but still very, very fun, very unique.
Yeah. And that's really cool. You have the opportunity and the flexibility there, and the freedom, the creative expression that you can do that and have some fun with it. So that's really cool. Matt, we're getting close to the end of round 3. I can't believe this already, but let's jump back and talk about this Huling Station Liquor Barn single barrel pick that you had. What do you pick up in terms of the palate and the finish on it?
The palate on this is where that rye really starts to shine. It's got the baking spice real big right up front, a lot of the cinnamon, cardamom, clove, those like really nice dark baking spices as well right up there. Then that chocolate note comes through again, kind of that Tootsie Roll, that like rock and rye cola type, like kind of cherry, whatever rock and rye really is type flavor. Then the nice sweetness from the corn, good influence from the barrel as well. Nice, long, spicy finish, but the corn definitely makes its presence felt in there too. There's that nice like corn bread, corn muffin, kind of corn fritter type flavor as well. Just really well done, complex, kind of hits on every level for me.
Yeah, and the proof on this one just is so nice. The rye, that heat on my tongue feels great. I absolutely love it. I'm still getting that root beer on the palate even. But cherry, it's funny. It's like a cherry root beer, which sounds almost gross, but it actually tastes really good. I can't describe it any other way. So you guys can drill down into all these nice, unique single notes, and I'm just like, it's a root beer. So, but very nice, Matt. Thank you so much for bringing that.
Oh, my pleasure.
To share. That was really cool. So, Alex, before we wrap it up, though, let's talk about the future. What does that look like for you, but also for Old Dominick?
I mean, we're full steam ahead with new products. So of course, right now focused on launching Tennessee across, all of our markets, but we do make a high rye bourbon in Memphis. And we're looking at doing some specialty batches of it later this year. Next year.
Look at Matt.
Interesting.
Yeah. So those are going to be coming out. So I'm working on what those look like right now. I was actually tasting those barrels this morning. And then we've got a wheat whiskey that we make here in Memphis that should be coming out sometime next year. But we also have some fun stuff with the Huling Station line too. And so we're right in the middle of our single barrel program for the year. And we're not only doing high rye bourbon single barrels, but we're doing wheat single barrels.
Oh, I love that wheat recipe.
Yeah.
So it's the 83% wheat, 12% corn, 5% malted barley. Those just start rolling out. We have some in Memphis that just went out, but we've got them across multiple of our markets. So definitely be looking out for those. But we also have a new kind of extension of the Huling Station line. I know it's been popping up on various social media channels now that the label's been approved, but it's our Trolley Stop series. Okay. And so Huling Station pays homage to one of the original buildings Old Dominick was bottled in on Huling Street. And Trolley Stop is an homage to, of course, the trolleys that we have in Memphis that are finally coming back online. And so we have them paying tribute to the various Main Street line and all the different ones. But this is a fun extension that allows us to have very fun specialty batches. So they're going to be kind of one-offs. It's going to be wheat. It's going to be bourbon. It's going to be whatever we want to come up with. And those should be starting to roll out later this year.
Very nice. Matt's just like over there drooling. And I know he's going to say, if you have anything you need him to taste through ahead of time for you, feel free to send it over. He'll be happy to give you his tasting notes.
Hey, his tasting notes are amazing. He needs to write them up for my marketing team.
There you go. So Alex, what's been the funnest part of this journey for you overall, from very beginning to now? What's been the funnest part of the whole journey, if you can sum that up?
Oh my gosh.
Any way to do that? I know you've got a lot.
No, there's no way. My career has been phenomenal. And the last 8 years have been amazing. But definitely one of the most exciting was being able to release the Tennessee whiskey last fall. And we did a release party in Memphis, and my parents actually came to town for it. And so it's one of the few parts of my career where they really got to be there to experience those milestones with me. So to have that was probably the the best thing.
Very, very, very nice. So where can our listeners find information about Old Dominick and your products?
Check us out. Our website's olddominic.com. Just remember 2 D's and a K at the end. Same with our Facebook and Instagram. And then you can also follow me on Instagram at Memphis Distiller. I try to give you kind of behind the scenes looks and typically give you sneak peeks on new products, even when my marketing team doesn't want me to.
That's the advantage of being the master distiller, Alex, right?
They want to tell me no, but they realize they struggle to do so.
Awesome. Well, any final thoughts before we wrap it up tonight?
Just find Old Dominick on your shelf. If we're not at your store, ask the manager, ask the owner to get it in, and just drink local.
Awesome. Matt, final thoughts before we wrap it up and send it home.
Alex, it has been an absolute delight having you back on the show. We're always grateful for that, and just great to check up on you again and see what all's been going on. And gosh, I hope it's not 2.5 years before we get to have you on again, because who knows what'll have changed since then. And we will be so behind the times on Old Dominick. So thank you again for
I don't even want to think about how old I'll be in 2.5 years. So, yeah, let's not wait that long.
I promise we won't wait that long. And the technology by then will also be so far advanced, we won't have any issues doing this show. But Alex, thank you so much for joining us again. And I promise we will not make it 2.5 years before we do this again. And I appreciate your patience again from last night, obviously with the technical issues. We really appreciate you working with us and sticking in and coming back tonight to record with us. We've had a lot of fun. This has been a great show. Love what you're doing with Old Dominick. The Huling station that we had before, I know Matt and I both just raved about it, but your Old Dominick line, this is really good stuff, and we're really excited for you. And I'm not a big Tennessee whiskey drinker, but hey, this is really good. I really, really enjoy it and love to see what you're doing, the success that you're having there. It's just great. Plus the fact you're a UK grad. I mean, come on, go Cats. But with that said, I probably need to wrap it up here. We are the Bourbon Life Podcast presented by Old Dominick Distillery, and we appreciate their support. We appreciate the support of all of our sponsors. We appreciate you, our listeners, whatever time of day it is you're listening and joining us. We just appreciate you taking the time to do that and to listen to us. And if you want to follow us, you can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also email us at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review on your favorite podcasting platform. Don't forget, we are also on YouTube. So now you can watch the Bourbon Life Podcast, much to Matt's chagrin, on YouTube. But we'd love to have you check that out and subscribe to us as well. With that said, I'm going to wrap it up, send us home with our tagline, which is, may your glasses always be full, and may you keep on living the Bourbon Life.
Thank you for joining us for this week's episode of the Bourbon Life Podcast. Our mission at the Bourbon Life is simple: to share our passion for all things bourbon with you every week. And we'd really love to hear your thoughts on how we're doing. You can find us on Instagram and Facebook at The Bourbon Life. You can also contact us by email at thebourbonlife@gmail.com. And you can always find us on your favorite podcast platform. If you have a moment, we'd love it if you would rate us and give us a review. So until next week, we hope your glass is always full and that you keep on living the Bourbon Life.